Welcome back to the Hard for Games channel, everybody. I'm your host, Tony, and I'll be joined today by Jerry Robotics, aka Behind the Code. Today we'll be dissecting literally and figuratively this proprietary Rareware development cartridge, so stay tuned and let's get into it. So I would like to set the stage first, and then Jerry, who is infinitely more technical than I am, will both take it from there and conduct an interview with Mark Green, who is the former electronics design engineer at Rare Ltd, aka Rareware, aka Rare. So first things first, there's a significant amount of confusion regarding these cartridges. Again, Jerry will provide more details, but here is your foundation, because these do not function like regular N64 development carts. So general rule of thumb is that if you see a cartridge like this, with connectors like these, it does not contain ROM data, read-only memory. Now, if you've ever played a game on an emulator, obviously you must have used a ROM and therefore a game, so this does not contain game data, no ROM. What it does have is RAM, random access memory. What this was designed to do was be put into an N64, connected to a development PC. The PC would feed the cartridge the game, it would store that game in RAM while the playtesters and debuggers would play it, and then as soon as the system was turned off, boom, RAM was wiped. No game anymore. So what does that have to do with Conker's Bad Fur Day? Well, I'm glad you asked, and I'm also glad that you actually read the title of the video before clicking. A couple of years back, a retro game store called The Game Room, that has a couple locations in Nebraska, was sold this cartridge, and they were told by the seller that it contained a beta of Conker's Bad Fur Day. Now, being a responsible seller, they wanted to figure out, well, is that true? And if it was, get the data dumped and preserved. Now, when they contacted me, I assumed, because it looked like a RAM cart, that it contained nothing, but a team of Jerry, Luigi Blood, Shane Batty, and other amazing, very technically minded individuals took a look at the chipset and determined that, yes, it was just a RAM cartridge. There's no possibility that there's any game data on this, unfortunately. But here's the thing, another seller and friend of mine, MyRetroPop.com, approached me a few years ago with one of these RAM cartridges, and it was labeled Conker's Quest. Now, Conker's Quest, Conker's 12 Tales, Conker's Bad Fur Day, all the same game, just at different stages of development. And he approached me asking, hey, could this thing actually contain a beta of Conker's Bad Fur Day on it? And just like this one, no, the answer was no, unfortunately, it could not. So I thought to myself, when I saw this one, could this be the same cartridge? But no, it's not the same cartridge. The number etched into it is different. The board was different. The chips were a little different. It was still a proprietary Rareware cartridge that they used at the company during the time for development, but they were different carts. So let's go ahead and get ourselves a little bit more educated on the subject matter. Take it away, Behind the Code.
Thanks so much, Tony. Hey, everyone. So today we're talking about the N64 Dev version 3 development cartridge for the Nintendo 64, which was released by Rare Limited during the 90s. And in the past, I'd done some research on this and was trying to find information, possibly find some documentation and software with hopes to get this unit up and running and to be able to share and demo this. Anyhow, in the past and all the research that I was doing, there was almost nothing. I wasn't able to find much at all online, and decided to actually reach out to some of the former developers to see if they might have an idea of how I could actually get this unit running. And everyone that I spoke with told me that I should be talking with an individual by the name of Mark Green. Now, Mark was a developer, an engineer who worked at Rare during that time, and was actually responsible for working with this particular cartridge that we're talking about here today. And through some discussions that I had with Mark, back and forth, we were going through emails, and I was trying to get some specifics and getting some details about the hardware and potentially software. And anyhow, just with further discussions with Mark, he actually agreed for me to interview him. And so today I'm going to be sharing with you guys the interview that I conducted with Mark just a couple of weeks back. And we're going to share that information with you here. Tony and I decided to put something together and present that to you guys so you guys get the information right from the source. So without further ado, this is Mr. Mark Green, former engineer from Rare Limited in the UK. Here we go. So hi, Mark. Tony and I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and make this call and answer some technical questions for us. So we really appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
You know, we were both pretty excited at and just super eager at the opportunity to pick your brain, so to speak. Yeah, it's such a a rare piece of development equipment. This cartridge that we're talking about here today. But to start off, just a little bit about yourself. Regarding Rare, when did you start working at Rare Limited, and what was your job title there?
So I was electronics design engineer. So thinking back now, I started back in 1996. So pretty much when they were sort of right in the middle of the development of GoldenEye, actually.
Oh, wow.
When I started. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So before that, I was designing sort of some arcade boards for a gaming company, and
like arcade machines.
They used to call them SWP, skills with prizes. So it was like Crystal Maze type games and stuff like that with a screen, and you'd answer questions, and they'd have graphics and video mixed in. So I used to design all the boards for that. So that's what sort of got me really in that kind of
that's
thing.
Really interesting.
Yeah. I started in '96. It's a fair while ago
now. And so who all did you work with there at Rare, on your day-to-day activities there? Were you part of a team, like a development team, or was it just sort of
there was three of us in the team. It was sort of a mixture of doing electronics development and a bit of IT support as well. The other guys were more doing the IT stuff in the department with some electronics, but I was mainly taken on to do the design work. I was sort of taken on to develop an in-house development kit. That was sort of my primary job when I first started, was to get designing this board that we're looking at today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. Like just thinking about your position at Rare, like on a day-to-day activity, what was a typical day like? Was there a lot of meetings or?
There wasn't a lot of meetings.
No.
I think I talked to a lot of the developers to find out what they needed in a development system.
Okay,
so,
right.
Exactly the features they were after. And then I sort of basically started sitting down and designing it. So built some really basic prototypes and tested those. So the day-to-day work was really doing all the CAD work. And I think it took, because it was all done by hand, it took months to design it and work out what I was going to do and actually lay the board out by hand using, I think we used Ultiboard. I don't think they're around anymore, but that was the CAD package we used. Yeah, it's all laid out by hand.
You actually designed the circuitry and everything for this board?
I did design the whole thing from scratch. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. You also had to build them and populate all the components on them on the.
Yeah.
Wow.
It had like a magnifying system, like a microscope,
right,
to the surface mount. So you look under that and use a little tiny flow soldering tip and flux to put the down. So it was all done by the originals were all done by hand. Yeah.
Wow, that's
pretty
wild.
Cool.
That's really cool. Yeah. So now, can you describe just the overall functionality of this particular cartridge that you designed?
Yeah. So basically, it's got like a Motorola. The core of it is the Motorola microcontroller.
Right.
So that, we picked that because it got some really great functionality at the time. Quite a lot of built-in like UARTs, and it got a DMA controller in it for direct memory access, which was really cool for moving data around fast, especially when it come to talking to the DRAM. So that was the core of it. Was the it says the Motorola, and that's got some RAM and some flash memory. So when I first built this, I only sort of populated that part of the board and got that bit running. So just the flash, Motorola, and the RAM, and just started writing a bit of code. Got it
Testing that functionality specifically. Okay, yeah.
Specifically before you populate the rest of it, so you can populate it in bits and pieces. So I got that bit working first, and then started getting the SCSI bus working then with the Indy workstations.
Okay, so it was with the Indy. So you had a SCSI interface to the Indy machine, or was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
SCSI. It was the standard interface that was on the Indy, so
right.
Hooked them up and used. Remember, we had to hire a SCSI bus analyzer, so we could actually look at the commands that were flowing backwards and forwards and get the protocol working properly and getting the handshaking working properly. That was quite a tricky. That took a few weeks to get that working just right. The handshaking.
Okay.
Initially, it was really slow, and then with the analyzer, we were able to get it speed up and get the download speeds and optimize the code so we could get really good download speeds over the SCSI bus.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
Then I suppose the next big bit was designing the Altera, because I had to design that I can't remember the name of the Altera software actually, but I didn't write it in what was called VHDL back then. I actually did it as a circuit diagram in there.
Okay, the graphical design, right.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's neat.
I did a few little bits in VHDL, but most of it was graphically done.
Right. Was that the Altera Max +2 software? Did you use that by chance? Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I'd like to see a copy of that, actually.
Yeah.
That'd be quite have another go with that.
But... yeah. A lot of the, a bunch of the guys that I know that we're into the older tech as well.
Yeah.
Using like the master programmers and all that. And that was, wow, that's really neat that you, that was the software.
The really cool thing about doing that was being able to emulate it on the computer, on the PC, and actually make sure that everything worked before you started, downloading the code or blowing the little serial EPROMs to actually test it working. But that's sort of the core of it is the Altera, because that does all the DRAM control. So the memory is just DRAM. So once the power's gone, there's no data left in any of those.
Okay, right. That was actually one of the questions a lot of people were wondering about. So now, what about some of the ports that are actually on? There's a series of different IDC ports on the board, and I know a lot of people were asking about those.
Yeah, so the one that's not populated, the P3 port at the bottom, that was for directly connecting and doing debug with the Altera. So you could compile your Altera flex code, and then you could upload it and test it straight away without having to keep blowing the little serial EPROMs.
Okay. So like a JTAG kind of interface.
JTAG interface, yeah. And then P2 connector is the special Motorola debug interface, SPI interface. So that's the way you could bootload the Motorola, and directly you could load the flash through that interface. So you could load the boot code through there and then actually start doing real-time debugging of your actual Motorola code as well.
Oh, wow.
Really cool. That was one of the reasons for picking it, was the way you could do that with the debug, rather than having to, say, blow EPROMs, and then run and blow more EPROMs when you were testing your boot code. You could literally just power it up and do everything through there. So it was really cool.
Okay, yeah. A lot faster than doing it the other way.
Yeah, with the old EPROM programmers, and then having to erase them with UV light and everything. Much faster. It's got a little bit of RAM there. There's 2 RAM chips. Right. You need a bit of scratch memory for your code. And then that other little chip there, which is U5, is a dual port RAM chip. And that allowed the N64 code to send debug information back through the Motorola CPU back to the Indy. So that allowed a flow of debug information between the game and the actual Indy. Yeah.
Okay, so then the setup, you would have the SCSI port hooked up to the Indy for doing the SCSI transfer, but then you would also have the serial Motorola unit connected to the Indy as well? Is that the way you would
No,
do
no,
it?
that was the little P2 connector was
Yeah.
only for development. Yeah, and
Okay.
actually, so when we got these boards,
Yeah.
when it was the design was finished and we got them made professionally,
Right.
they'd come in obviously with no coding, and I physically uploaded the base code to all of the units through that little P2 connector, so it brought them alive basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you did that through the Indy, or was it with a PC? Which system?
That was with PC.
Oh,
Yeah,
that
the
was with a
Motorola.
PC. Okay.
Yeah, the code, the Motorola or the Motorola debug code was all PC based.
Okay.
Same as the Altera development tools were all
Oh,
done
okay.
on the
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And so now also the top DE9 connector there. What's that all about?
Oh yeah, that's for the CIC chips, so you could test your game worked with all the correct region code. So we had different colors. I've seen some ones that are blue. We had yellow and red ones for different region locked chips in, so we could put them on, just plug them in and test the code worked okay.
Okay.
And so there was a blank space at the bottom, which is U23. So you could permanently put one in there if you wanted. If it was going to be permanently region locked, you could just solder one in there.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, okay. Right. Depending
Yeah.
on, so I guess more the top dongle there connector is more for just quick swapping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. One other thing is there was a lot of people talking about these little red flash kind of chips on these little boards, and we're wondering what they were used for.
So they're for the save games. So not every cartridge had. Some of them had different size, memory in there, but that was just for save games basically. So you just drop it in the N64 connector at the top, and you could do the save games, which is pretty.
Okay, save games. Okay.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people were wondering about security, if it was some sort of additional, security potentially.
Tiny little modules that we did do that sat between the development cartridge and the N64 that had some very basic encryption in.
Okay.
So they wouldn't allow the game to run unless that module was there in between the cartridge and the console. It would sort of mess up the code. So unless you put the right encryption key in there, it wouldn't allow the code to run at all.
Ah, okay. So, some additional protection.
We used those with the eventually when I think it might have been the partner N64 had some flash carts later on. They actually came out with some flash carts that you could permanently program. We used them with those as well.
Oh, wow.
So we were sending games out to people to test around the world or to shows. It wouldn't work unless you had the right dongle to go with it. And so they were used with those as well as these development kits.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to keep it from getting spread around accidentally, so to speak. Wow, that's really interesting. Getting that sort of idea, because I know a lot of people were it was always sort of a mystery as to how it all worked. Yeah. Over the years, there's been a few collectors that have come across these particular rare N64 Dev version 3 cartridges, and as Tony had mentioned, they just seem to be popping up a little bit more and more lately. And there's claims that that there's prototype games being stored in the ROM memory of these devices.
Well, no, unfortunately not. Like I mentioned, they're DRAMs, so they can't. Once the power's gone, there's no code left back in there anymore. So I'm afraid not. The shame.
Okay, yeah, that's what a lot of us were saying the same thing, but we wanted to confirm that individuals that are claiming this are just pulling everyone's leg, trying to.
Yeah, it was never designed to retain any games. It was always designed to just work when it was plugged in and powered up.
Right. Okay, so before we close off, a lot of people are always so curious what it's like working at Rare Limited during the N64's, time in the spotlight there during the 90s. And, you know, and that it was quite the place to work, and still is to this day. So what was your experience like? What were the memories there that you had there?
It was absolutely incredible, because you used to go around and you used to see all the games in development, and you know, you used to get, you know, I was getting to play GoldenEye before anybody even knew about it. And
wow.
You used to see a lot of the concepts that people were, you know, working on, and it was just incredible atmosphere. I want to look back, it makes you wonder, I probably didn't really appreciate as much as I should have, because I was more of a, I shouldn't say this, I was more of a Sega man. I didn't realize how amazing the Nintendo games were and what they'd actually done. But obviously once I saw GoldenEye and the other games they were working on, it was amazing. Really amazing creative bunch of guys and there, and it was good. Really good atmosphere. They really looked after people.
Okay, and so last but not least, do you recall the so-called Death Star SGI Challenge supercomputers that were around? Do you remember those?
I do. It was incredible. That was an incredible machine. It was like the size of a American double, you know, freezer fridge. It was just huge, and the door was just as big.
Oh my god!
And it had huge CPU boards that were probably, you know, they were sort of the size of a good 17-inch laptop, perhaps even bigger, and so it had multiple CPU boards that slotted in.
Oh wow!
And then there was a separate disk unit which was connected by two SCSI cables that had got all the disk drives in, and that was the size of a small sideboard. So it was like, that was just a disk drive.
Oh my gosh, that's wild. That is wild. That's so cool. And so did you actually, so you worked on the SGI machines? Yeah, you had to deal with those.
I worked with actually had to go out to SG in San Francisco, and he spent almost a month out there training actually to how to maintain and look after.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, because it was originally used to, Nintendo actually bought it for Rare after they saw what they could do with the rendering of the sprites. You know, for Donkey Kong, they bought them this so it could all be done a lot quicker.
Okay.
So yeah, it was a pretty cool piece of kit.
Wow, that's amazing.
Probably got more power in your iPhone
now. Wow, that is so cool. That's so cool to hear all that, Mark. On behalf of me and Tony, Mark, just want to thank you for sharing all this, you know, really interesting and valuable information with everyone here today. We really, really do appreciate you taking the time.
No, thank you. Thanks for having us on.
So big thank you to Behind the Code, big thanks to Mark for doing the interview, and of course, thank you to the Game Room for letting us borrow this, check it out, investigate, all that good stuff. It's always refreshing when you see a retro game seller, especially one dealing with like prototypes and development hardware, do their due diligence and figure out, okay, what is on this thing so we can set up an honest sale. So I'm going to go ahead and put a link to their online store as well as their address and contact information in the description below. If you're interested in taking a look at what they have, this particular cart will be online on their store shortly, but pay them a visit, say hello to them, check them out, all that good stuff. And aside from that, thank you all for watching and joining us. We'll see you all next time.